After much anticipation, Alien, Earth is finally online. This is the first spin-off in the Creature series. It is also the first time the story is set on Earth. The human homeland will become the new breeding ground for the creatures. 5 never-before-seen deadly species will descend upon Earth. It also features a crossover with the super xenomorph. The plot is incredibly intense and thrilling. A must-watch for fans of xenomorphs. The story is set in the year 2120. That is, a few decades before Alien 1. At this time, humanity has already achieved immortality, and the concept of nations on Earth has long since vanished. All resources are controlled by 5 major corporate giants. They are Weyland Tengu, Lynch, Moving Bear, Threshold, and a new company founded just 10 years ago, Prodigy. Though it appears young in history, Prodigy has developed at an astonishing pace over the years, especially making major breakthroughs in android technology. They have even developed revolutionary hybrid technology. It allows human consciousness to be implanted into an android's brain, creating humanoid machines capable of living forever. And the capabilities of these synthetic humans are greatly enhanced. As long as consciousness transfer continues, they can, in a sense, become truly immortal. Through this groundbreaking technology, Prodigy Company becomes Weyland Company's strongest competitor. However, at present, Weyland still focuses its efforts on extraterrestrial life research. One day, the company sends an exploration team aboard the ship Machino into deep space. They embark on a 65-year space expedition. During this mission, they collect samples of 5 new species, all prepared to be brought back for further study. But little did they know, as they entered stasis to prepare for the return journey, the creatures locked in special containers had already begun to stir. Meanwhile, in a place on Earth called Dream Island, Prodigy has built a research center specifically dedicated to android development. The little girl, Wendy, was one of the test subjects. She suffered from an incurable disease, but she was highly valued by the Research Institute. One day, Wendy was curiously observing something. At that moment, a female researcher named Mrs. May appeared. She took Wendy to a specially designed ward. As soon as she entered, Wendy saw on the hospital bed a humanoid synthetic shaped like an adult woman. She walked forward curiously to take a closer look. "Will I become like that?" "Yes, that is you." No sooner had she spoken than the founder of Prodigy entered the ward. He excitedly announced that Wendy would be the first person in the world to have her consciousness transferred into a synthetic body. From then on, she would be the most unique being on Earth. Wendy didn't fully understand, but she knew this might save her life. It would also give her a better chance to see her brother again. So she lay on the other bed without any resistance. As the machine powered on, blue light flickered beneath her body. Soon, the synthetic slowly opened its eyes. Memories flashed by like a movie reel. Clearly, the consciousness transfer was a success. From that day on, Wendy lived in this world as a synthetic being. Days passed, one after another. Aside from her greatly enhanced physical abilities, Wendy felt no discomfort. She could even jump off a 1,000-meter cliff and land safely without a scratch. The only regret was, Wendy had lost all the emotions she had as a human. "We're done. She's no longer human. Then what am I? If I'm not human, then what am I?" No one had the heart to answer that question. They told her she could be whatever she wanted now. Soon after, Mrs. May brought good news. She said Wendy would soon have new companions. From now on, she would no longer be alone. After the success of the consciousness transfer experiment, the Institute decided to use the same method to create a new batch of synthetics. Naturally, Wendy became their big sister. She used her own experience to comfort the children who were about to undergo consciousness transfer. Hearing they would soon have healthy bodies, those gravely ill children immediately and joyfully agreed to the transfer. Not long after, with Wendy's witness and company, 5 new synthetics were successfully born. They were equally pure and kind, unable to feel emotions but able to communicate. However, while Dream Island was peaceful and calm, the spaceship Maginot in outer space suffered heavy damage. A piercing alarm echoed throughout the ship. Navigation was damaged, cargo seals failed, and samples escaped. One by one, safety reports showed alarming incidents. At that moment, the main control room door was pounded violently. Crew members outside shouted for help, but Chief Engineer Morrow acted as if he didn't hear. He even conjured a welding torch in his hand and completely sealed the door's gap. Then he calmly returned to his seat to write a report. After he finished, a xenomorph monster slowly revealed its terrifying face that could shatter one's sanity. It then kept wandering outside the door. Meanwhile, Morrow's condition seemed very abnormal. He kept typing on the keyboard. Collision with Earth is now unavoidable. Outside, the xenomorph creature smashed through the control room glass, but its body couldn't squeeze through the narrow doorway. Morrow took the chance to type the final word. Before the creature could break in, he managed to hide inside the defense chamber. Just as the door was closing, a drop of slime fell onto Morrow's hand. He casually wiped it away without a thought. Outside, the creature kept slamming into the hull. Countdown to impact, 10 seconds. 4, 3, 2. At the same time, Earth's Prodigy City bustled with its usual noise. But then someone suddenly noticed a huge object in the sky rapidly approaching. Sigma, who was on duty, witnessed the whole process firsthand. Soldier Joe was the first to react. He quickly signaled his teammates to inform headquarters, then grabbed his gear to rush to the rescue. This seemingly thin man was none other than Wendy's beloved older brother. Soon, the rescue vehicle arrived at the crash site. The soldiers immediately put on helmets and checked equipment. As a medic, Joe's main task was to treat the wounded. But upon stepping onto the scene, he realized it was already a place of devastation. The spaceship had crashed in the city center, causing massive casualties. Once he snapped back to focus, Joe immediately followed his comrades toward the blast site. It was a large shopping mall. Upon entering, the squad leader split the team into two groups, searching both sides carefully. They were looking for any sign of survivors, but aside from the occasional crackle of explosions at the scene, there was only a strange, eerie, human-like sound. It sounded like a broadcast. They immediately followed the sound to search. Sure enough, deep in the mall, they found a large crater in the floor. The sound was coming from below. The soldiers quickly went down with guns raised. As soon as they pushed open a door, they saw an injured man pinned under a crate. The medic rushed forward to give treatment, but just then Joe stepped into the deepest room. Unexpectedly, the sight before him left him frozen on the spot. The crashed spaceship was pitch black, embedded into the structure. Sparks were still flying all around. Before he could recover, his teammates had already entered the ship's interior to investigate further. Soon, the squad leader confirmed from its internal structure that it was a Weyland Corporation science vessel. It must have been attacked and destroyed mid-flight. The team then split into two groups to search in different directions. Little did they know, a terrible danger was hiding here. Meanwhile, Morrow, protected by the defense chamber, had narrowly escaped, but as soon as he crawled out, he saw people entering the spaceship. Even worse, the alien biological samples brought back from space were missing, so he immediately sent a warning to Weyland headquarters, hoping they could quickly dispatch reinforcements. He decided to head to the armory to pick weapons and try to protect the site until help arrived. Elsewhere, Wendy, who was in training, suddenly looked alarmed. She quickly stood up and swiped her screen. The TV was reporting that a Weyland Corporation spaceship had crashed into Earth. Seeing her brother's familiar face on the screen, Wendy completely lost the mood to continue her class. At the same time, Raymond, the founder of Prodigy Corp., also received the news. But instead of rescuing survivors, he was more interested in Weyland Corporation's spaceship. He summoned his reserve team to prepare to explore and claim the ship for himself. Just then, Wendy suddenly stepped forward and volunteered. She said that, "Boys, synthetic children could handle the mission. We are agile, strong, and cannot be defeated. We can do it." Raymond was clearly surprised, but after learning Wendy wanted to save her trapped brother, the smile on his face became even more meaningful. Her reaction suggested she still remembered past emotions. This was a rare experimental opportunity. So, ignoring the objections of researchers, he decisively approved full deployment of the synthetic children. He ordered all technical staff to take their positions and monitor the brainwave activity of Wendy and the others in real time. After leaving Raymond's office, Wendy immediately went to her room to grab her favorite doll. Then she strapped a long sword to her back and quickly found the other four. Upon hearing about the rescue mission, some people suddenly became excited. They eagerly agreed, tired of the dull life in the lab. Once they were ready, the synthetic children, led by researcher Lay, boarded an aircraft bound for the crash site. Meanwhile, the rescue team was still searching inside the spaceship. Uncertain if there were survivors, they searched each room one by one. Two soldiers entered a dimly lit room and found that the equipment inside was still functioning. Even more frightening, inside the special reinforced glass was a strange, deformed creature floating in liquid. It was not any life form known on Earth. One soldier stood frozen in shock, completely unaware that a writhing, unknown organism had silently dropped onto his shoulder. It then slithered into his collar. Next moment, a loud bang suddenly erupted nearby. The two soldiers, who were about to keep exploring, were startled and hurriedly ran out of the room in panic. But as soon as they entered the corridor, they were caught on the spot by Morrow, who was tracking intruders. Facing a deadly threat, the two soldiers had no choice but to drop their guns. Under Morrow's orders, they were taken back to the lab and tied back to a pillar. It was then the soldiers finally realized something was wrong. Morrow was actually a synthetic. No wonder he survived the violent crash. After confirming the lab samples were compromised, Morrow left without a glance, heading off to capture other intruders. Meanwhile, Joe had arrived at the cryo-sleep chamber. He intended to check if there were any surviving crew. But to his horror, every stasis pod had been broken. Not a single crew member had survived. Each body had a massive hole in the abdomen, as if attacked by some unknown creature. Joe deduced that they had been dead for over a week. His teammates immediately realized that something terrible had happened before the ship's destruction. Knowing it was unsafe, the three quickly left. Just then, someone spotted a damaged stasis pod in the corner, with a terrifying non-Earth creature lying inside. Elsewhere, the two tied-up soldiers were shouting loudly for help, but no matter how much they raised their voices, there was never any reply. Just as they were preparing to free themselves, Soldier Hoy suddenly felt something squirming on him. The touch felt like a soft-bodied creature. He instantly screamed in fear. The next second, the unknown creature bit directly into his artery, sucking blood and quickly swelling in size. Then the other soldier was also attacked by an unknown creature and eventually died in the same gruesome way. Incidents inside the spaceship kept happening one after another. Meanwhile, the synthetics were still on their way. Researcher Lay told Wendy to prepare for the worst. The Wayland Company's ship was bound to be extremely dangerous. But even if Joe died during the rescue mission, it would still be something the family could be proud of. But Wendy firmly insisted that Joe would not die, because she would do everything in her power to save him. At the same time, Joe had followed the team into another room. As expected, it was already a scene of devastation. Inside, crew members' bodies lay scattered. Every single one had died tragically. The amount of blood made one teammate curse out loud. Strangely, however, these people didn't seem to have died from the crash. It was more like they had suffocated. One teammate dismissed it, thinking it was just cabin depressurization that caused an oxygen drop, leading to the tragedy. But Joe immediately denied it, because all the dead had unnaturally purple lips. It was more like they had been poisoned. He then reviewed the surveillance footage and saw that one crew member lying in the infirmary bed, there seemed to be something inside the digestive tract earlier, but now it had completely disappeared. For the moment, no one could figure out why. The captain could only urge everyone to leave and search other rooms for survivors. But as soon as they stepped out of the room, Joe grabbed Yuxidi's arm and said those bodies might very well be alien-related. The other man instantly gasped in shock, realizing the situation was getting worse. But as soldiers of this city, they had the duty to protect all its citizens' safety. So Yuxidi still decided to finish exploring the ship to gather the most detailed information. With no choice, Joe, as a crew member, could only follow orders. Soon, they passed through the corridor's security door and entered an entirely new area. The interior structure had a massive hole carved out of it. The three stopped at the edge of the hole, unsure whether to advance or retreat. Fortunately, Yuxidi quickly regained focus and headed toward the right. Joe and Ryan hurriedly followed. The three descended a staircase, preparing to check the lower deck of the ship. But halfway down, the staircase was broken in half. Walking to the platform below was now impossible. So, not wanting to waste time, Yuxidi gritted his teeth and jumped down. Fortunately, he was agile and landed safely on the lower platform. But Ryan wasn't so lucky. He missed his step and almost fell. Luckily, Yuxidi grabbed his wrist in time and pulled him back from the brink of death. Once safe, the two signaled for Joe to jump over quickly. But just as they said that, a drop of sticky fluid fell onto Joe's shoulder. He immediately looked up in fear toward the hole above. Moments later, a terrifying xenomorph suddenly appeared. Joe's face instantly turned pale. Without thinking, he jumped toward the lower platform. However, in midair, the xenomorph grabbed him and dragged him toward the unfathomable pit below. After landing, Joe endured the pain and quickly got up. But the xenomorph relentlessly chased after him. Fortunately, at the last moment, Joe rushed into a still-functioning elevator, managing to trap the creature outside the doors. Still shaken, he immediately took out his radio to report his situation to Yuxidi and request backup. But there was no response on the channel, only the sound of static. The already silent atmosphere felt even more unsettling. Meanwhile, after hours of flying, Wendy and the others finally reached the shipwreck site. The synthetic soldier, Xiao, stepped off the ship with his weapon. The devastation before them was beyond their expectations. Researcher Lai immediately found the person in charge and expressed his desire to join the rescue. The person in charge naturally refused at first, but at that moment, Wendy suddenly stopped walking, saying she had heard a faint buzzing sound, but she didn't know where it came from. Strangely, it seemed no one else could hear the sound except her. Unable to figure it out, Wendy didn't dwell on it and followed the researcher into the temporary rescue tent. However, she wasn't in the mood to chat with anyone and went straight to check the surveillance footage inside. She quickly located Joe, who was trapped inside the elevator. After giving the exact location to the local military, Wendy completely ignored her friend's attempts to stop her and rushed out of the tent with her weapon in hand, ready to go into the spaceship alone to rescue her brother. Seeing they couldn't hold her back at all, Lai had no choice but to order Soldier Wallace to follow Wendy, while he led the rest into the spaceship to search for survivors. Not long after, everyone began entering the spaceship, one after another. Wendy headed straight for the elevator where her brother was trapped, while Lai led the others to search carefully, not truly to rescue survivors, but in reality, to help Raymond understand the ship's structure and uncover Wayland Corporation's hidden secrets. Because Raymond believed that with Wayland's obsession with alien life forms, this research vessel must be hiding alien specimens. However, after the team carefully searched every outer room, they only found piles of books and documents, along with various strange experimental devices, but not a single trace of any survivors. Fortunately, as they ventured deeper inside, Lai finally noticed something unusual. On the ceiling at the end of the corridor was a cluster of strange eggs from an unknown species. The team cautiously approached to inspect them. Meanwhile, back at the command post, Raymond was also watching the live feed from the spaceship's surveillance. Realizing this was not a species from Earth, Lai immediately ordered everyone to stay on high alert. He then decided to stay there with one soldier, while sending the other three to look for tools that could capture the creature. No sooner had he spoken than the three soldiers walked into the laboratory behind them. Unexpectedly, they were greeted by two corpses and a rolling ball of blood from a severed neck. They watched as the thing writhed swiftly on the floor. The two soldiers instantly turned pale with shock. They couldn't help but let out terrified screams. Fortunately, the other female soldier remained relatively calm. Using the faint beam of her flashlight to scan the surroundings, she spotted something else unusual. On the lab table lay a dissected alien creature. The three of them then continued to explore deeper. Unexpectedly, they came across a figure covered in blood. Just as they were frozen in shock, the figure suddenly walked toward them. Then, from its eye socket, dropped a creature resembling an octopus, but with a head covered in eyeballs. Before the three could react, the creature lunged toward them at extreme speed. Luckily, the attacked female soldier managed to fling it away with force, barely escaping with her life. Meanwhile, Wendy and Reese had arrived at the staircase Joe had passed. Sure enough, they found her brother's dropped backpack on the platform. She immediately confirmed she was on the right path and began searching the nearby area. They soon spotted two bloody handprints on the door ahead. The shape resembled bear claws. But how could there be a bear on the spaceship? While Wendy was still baffled by the thought, Joe had narrowly escaped death and arrived at an apartment block via the elevator. He kept calling for help over the intercom, but the channel remained completely silent. Just then, a light suddenly flashed ahead. Joe immediately stopped in his tracks. To his surprise, it was CD, who had been separated earlier. Seeing a familiar face, Joe let out a sigh of relief. He quickly asked CD if he had seen any unknown creatures, but CD said he hadn't, and even joked that Joe must be hallucinating. However, before he could finish speaking, Seeing CD's face already mangled beyond recognition, Joe quickly forced himself to stay calm. He then picked up the weapon that had fallen from CD's hand and slowly approached in the direction the creature had gone. By now, the room was a river of blood. Several bodies lay on the floor and beside the dining table. One half-bodied person was still writhing. Joe's eyes widened in horror at the sight. The next second, a xenomorph smashed through the glass and dove down. Joe was knocked to the ground before he could react. It was about to make him its next meal. But then, a beam of electric current suddenly struck the creature, knocking it unconscious. The rescuer turned out to be Morrow, the ship's sole survivor. Joe, still shaken, got to his feet and sincerely thanked his lifesaver. But Morrow showed no gratitude. He shot Joe with another electric charge. Then, he sprinkled some unknown substance onto the xenomorph. Moments later, a fabric-like material formed over the monster's body. Morrow then dragged the xenomorph away without looking back, leaving Joe alone in a room full of corpses. However, as soon as he dragged the sample into the elevator, Morrow was surrounded by a group of soldiers. At that very moment, the fabric-covered creature suddenly began to move. The soldiers immediately raised their guns in alarm. Seeing this, Morrow quickly raised his hands and turned away. The next second, the creature burst free and killed all the soldiers. Realizing the monster was closing in on him, Morrow swiftly conjured a short blade in his hand, ready to fight to the death. But unexpectedly, the creature turned away and left, leaving behind a floor soaked in blood and shattered remains. Meanwhile, the alien egg in the corridor also began to stir. It extended a long tentacle, approaching the synthetic crew member guarding it. But in the end, it did not harm him. Instead, it seemed to be communicating with him. Of course, the crew member had no idea what the tentacle meant, so he could only walk away in confusion. Meanwhile, Wendy and Reese followed the elevator to the apartment building that had been turned into a bloodbath. Seeing the floor covered in blood and bodies, the two were struck speechless. Could there really be a bear here? But to Wendy's relief, when she stepped into the wide-open apartment, she finally saw the brother she had dreamed of day and night. However, upon reuniting, the siblings did not have a touching embrace. Only Wendy's eyes brimmed with tears of joy. Joe didn't recognize the girl in front of him at all, because in his memory, Wendy was still a little girl who hadn't grown up. But this was not the right place to reminisce. When Lay learned they had found him, he immediately ordered Wendy to return to camp. On the way back, however, Reese deliberately let it slip, telling Joe that Wendy was his biological sister, only she had been reprogrammed into a synthetic human. Joe froze on the spot at this revelation because his father had told him his sister was dead. That was why all these years he had never searched for her. Completely unaware that she had been taken by Prodigy Corp to become a test subject in synthetic human research. Thinking about all the years he had missed her, Joe's heart was filled with regret. But at this point, he could only follow Wendy away. However, upon returning to the ship again, they found themselves in a room they had never entered before. They discovered a large amount of strange material. It looked like eggs of alien creatures. At the same time, Wendy's ears once again rang with a buzzing sound. Then, a xenomorph suddenly lunged at Joe, taking him down to the lower level of the spaceship. The above is the content of the first 2 episodes of Alien Earth. Where exactly has Joe been taken? Can Wendy rescue her brother once again? And next, what new type of alien creature will appear? All the answers will be revealed in the next update. Those interested can check out the original show.